Hello, welcome to Phantom Homicide, the monster of the Andes, the fugitive serial killer who vanished. Today, we're doing a real deep dive, a critical one, actually, into a case that's it's a chilling example of institutional failure. And, frankly, the banality of evil. We're talking about Pedro Alonso Lopez.
A name that became absolutely synonymous with terror across South America, late 70s, early 80s.
Exactly. This is the story of a man who claimed literally hundreds of lives. He got a sentence that was honestly laughably short for the scale of his crimes.
Secondly short, yeah.
And then, maybe the most disturbing part, he basically just walked out of a mental hospital, paid a tiny bail fee, and vanished. Just disappeared.
And when we talk about Pedro Lopez, you really have to grasp the scale here. We're dealing with someone who is, by almost any measure, one of the most prolific serial killers ever recorded. I mean, the documented evidence confirms 110 murders.
110 confirmed.
Confirmed. But Lopez himself, he consistently claimed his victim count was well over 300, mostly young girls. His whole story is this dark crossroads of, extreme violence, massive systemic failures across 3 different countries.
Colombia, Peru, Ecuador.
Right. And it brutally highlights the vulnerability of the most marginalized people in that region.
So our mission today isn't just to list the awful things he did. We need to really unpack his entire life. The crimes, sure, but also how he was caught, that unbelievable confession.
Which was extraordinary in itself.
Absolutely. And then the circumstances of his release and disappearance, it's just baffling. This forces us to look beyond Lopez the monster and examine the kind of societal cracks that let him operate for a decade. It's as much about system failure as it is about him.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. To even try and understand this level of horror, we have to go back, look into the shadows of his past. Where did Pedro Lopez come from?
It starts, as it so often does, with trauma and instability. He was born Pedro Alonso Lopez in 1948, Venadillo, Colombia. 7th of 13 kids. 13 children. Wow.
Yeah, and the home environment was just defined by extreme poverty, instability. Violence was sort of ambient. His mother, Benilde Lopez de Castañeda, she worked washing clothes. Lopez later claimed she was also involved in prostitution, though that's his claim.
And his father?
No father figure, really. His father, Medardo Reyes, he was apparently a member of the Colombian Conservative Party, was murdered during this period called La Violencia.
Okay, hang on. La Violencia, can you give us a bit of context on that? What was happening then?
Sure. La Violencia means the violence, and it was this brutal, roughly decade-long civil conflict in Colombia from about 48 to 58, pitting the liberal and conservative parties against each other.
So, political violence.
Intense political violence. Widespread guerrilla fighting in rural areas, assassinations, massacres, immense instability. And Lopez's father was killed in this conflict about 6 months before Pedro was even born.
So he literally entered a world defined by chaos and violence from day one.
Exactly. Political turmoil, social breakdown, families being torn apart. That was the backdrop.
Born into poverty, instability, violence. And then things got worse within his own home, didn't they? There seems to be a really catastrophic turning point when he was just 8 years old.
That's right. The family moved to a place called El Espinal when he was 5. But at 8, yeah, that's when the cycle of trauma really seemed to take hold internally. His mother apparently caught him trying to sexually molest his younger sister.
Oh, God.
And her reaction was swift and brutal. She kicked him out, banished him from the home, just forced him onto the streets of Bogota, an 8-year-old kid. Abandoned, traumatized.
That abandonment, particularly by his mother, that feels like such a key element in his later development, doesn't it? What happens to a kid alone on the streets back then?
It's predictable, sadly. Predation. Lopez himself was frequently sexually abused on the streets. He was desperate, looking for protection, and eventually fell in with a gang of other street kids.
Gypsy in numbers, maybe.
Some degree of it, yeah. But it cemented him outside of normal society. There was, interestingly, a brief moment, maybe a chance, yeah, at age 12. He was adopted by an American immigrant family.
Really? That could have changed everything.
You'd think so. But even that fell apart. He claimed he fled after being sexually assaulted again, this time by a teacher at the school he was sent to. So you see this pattern, right? Victimization, abandonment, betrayal, reinforcing this worldview where cruelty is the norm.
And then that internal trauma starts manifesting outwards. He gets into crime, ends up in prison in 1969. What was the initial charge?
Relatively minor, actually. Auto theft. He got a 7-year sentence. But prison, well, it wasn't exactly rehabilitative. It became a trauma multiplier for him.
What happened inside?
According to reports and his own accounts, he was gang raped by 3 other inmates while serving that sentence.
Jesus.
And his response to that compounded trauma Well, it led to his first known killings. He hunted down and killed those 3 inmates. Revenge.
He killed 3 people in prison. What was the consequence for that? This feels like a critical moment.
It is. And the response is, frankly, bewildering. The system extended his original 7-year sentence by only 2 years.
2 years for 3 murders inside a prison.
2 years. You have to remember, maybe, the context of 1970s Colombian prisons.
Yeah.
Likely chaotic, overcrowded, focused on containment, perhaps not the severity of individual inmate-on-inmate crimes. The lives of prisoners didn't hold much institutional weight, maybe.
So essentially, minimal consequences. What does that teach a young man already on a dark path?
Impunity. Absolute impunity. It seems this act and the almost non-existent punishment really cemented his violent path forward. It solidified this revenge mentality. Prison didn't correct him. It taught him that lethal violence worked for settling scores and, crucially, carried barely any real penalty. It basically incubated the monster he would become. So let's jump forward. 1978, López is released. And what's striking is how fast his violence escalates and how clever he was about using geography.
Right, he didn't stay put. He started moving. Colombia, Peru, Ecuador,
Yeah.
using the borders like shields. And his victim profile was terrifyingly consistent.
Frighteningly specific, yes. Young girls, almost exclusively, usually between 8 and 12 years old. Sometimes even younger, maybe 9. But it wasn't random. It was strategic.
How so?
He systematically targeted street children, kids from desperately poor backgrounds. He particularly focused on indigenous communities in Peru.
Why them specifically?
He knew they were invisible to the system. He understood that if an indigenous street girl vanished in some remote part of Peru, it probably wouldn't even be reported quickly, let alone trigger a major investigation.
Mm-hmm.
He was exploiting that marginalization, operating in the dark figures of crime, the crimes that never make the official statistics.
And his claims about Peru, they're just staggering. He said he killed over 100 girls there.
Over 100 indigenous street girls, yes. That was his claim. And there's this one truly bizarre, terrifying story about him almost being caught, not by police, but by the community itself.
What happened there?
Apparently, he was caught trying to abduct a 9-year-old girl in the Ayacucho region, a very remote area. The local indigenous people apprehended him, and they administered their own justice.
Which was?
They stripped him, took everything he had, and then they buried him alive in the sand, like an ancient ritual punishment. They were bypassing the state entirely.
Buried him alive. You'd think that would be the end of him.
It nearly was. But then an American missionary stumbled upon the scene, and he convinced the locals not to kill him, but to turn him over to the actual police.
Okay, so the police get him. Finally.
Yes. But here's the next massive institutional failure. The Peruvian police. They didn't hold him. They didn't investigate the attempted abduction or look into potential past murders there. They simply expelled him, kicked him out of the country.
They deported him, knowing why he was caught?
Yes, deported him right across the border into Ecuador, effectively handing one of the world's most dangerous predators a free pass to continue.
Unbelievable. So he just resumes his spree in Ecuador. And the authorities there, they were noticing girls going missing, right? But they didn't connect it.
It was a catastrophic failure of pattern recognition.
Yeah.
They saw missing girls, yes, but they just assumed it was, human trafficking cases.
Right.
Or kids running away. They completely missed the signature of a serial killer operating right under their noses.
Which allowed him to just keep going. Let's talk about his method, his modus operandi. It sounds like it was all about control.
Completely. His strategy was about gaining trust and control, fast. He'd lure them away, a small trinket, some food, a bit of money, get them isolated.
And then
Then it was brutal. Sexual assault followed to strangulation with his bare hands. That physical intimacy, the hands-on nature of the killing, it seems to provide that maximum sense of dominance he craved.
And some of the details he later confessed, they reveal a real sadism, don't they? Like killing during the day?
That detail is crucial. He specifically said he preferred daylight so he could, quote, see the life leaving their eyes. That's not opportunistic. That's calculated pleasure derived from the act of killing, from witnessing the suffering, the destruction he caused. It's about power.
And there was something else even more disturbing about what he did after the murders.
Yes. López claimed, and it's hard to even comprehend, that he would sometimes go back to the burial sites, weeks, maybe months later,
Yeah.
dig up the bodies,
Oh, no.
and have what he called tea parties with the remains. It shows this profound, ongoing obsession, using their bodies symbolically, long after death. It's beyond necrophilia. It's some kind of deep ritualistic psychopathy rooted in possession and absolute control.
When they finally caught him and asked why the girls, why this level of violence, What was his explanation?
He gave this twisted rationalization. He said, and this is another quote, "I lost my innocence at age of 8, so I decided to do the same to as many girls as I could."
Blaming his own trauma.
Exactly. It's classic projection. That maternal rejection, the abuse he suffered, that became his core wound. His violence, the pedophilia, the need for control, that became this perverted form of revenge against the idea of the feminine, linked to his own pain. He wasn't just killing girls, he was symbolically replaying and reversing his own perceived destruction, making them lose their innocence as he felt he had.
Okay, so this killing spree is just going on, unchecked across borders. How did it finally end? How did they catch him? It wasn't exactly brilliant police work, was it?
No. Ironically, it was a combination of community action and an act of nature, a literal act of God almost.
Made sure how.
In April 1980, there were severe flash floods in the area around Ambato, Ecuador, and these floods washed away topsoil, eroded the ground.
And uncovered bodies.
Exactly. The waters unearthed the remains of several young girls who had been reported missing. Suddenly, there was physical evidence that couldn't be ignored. This finally forced the police to reopen these cases and realize, okay, this isn't trafficking, this is something much worse.
A serial killer.
Yes. And then, shortly after this discovery, his actual capture happened because people stepped in.
What happened?
He tried to abduct another girl in Ambato, a 12-year-old named Marie. She was with her mother, Carvina Poveda, going to the market. The mother fought back.
Good for her.
Absolutely. And crucially, local market vendors saw what was happening, maybe spurred on by the recent news of the bodies found after the flood. They didn't hesitate. They jumped in, overpowered Lopez, and held him, physically restrained him until the police arrived.
So local people caught him, finally arrested for the murders.
His first official arrest for the serial killings, yes. A real moment of community triumph over this predator, where the official systems had failed for so long.
But once they had him, he didn't just confess immediately, did he?
No, initially he was silent, refused to cooperate. The police knew they had a monster, they had the bodies turning up, but they needed to connect him directly to all of them.
So how did they break him?
They used a pretty clever, though maybe ethically questionable, interrogation tactic. They took a police captain, Pastor Cordova, and put him in the same cell as Lopez, pretending to be just another prisoner. The idea was to play on Lopez's biggest weakness, his ego, his narcissism.
Need to brag.
Exactly, and Lopez fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. He started boasting to his supposed cellmate, Cordova, about just how many people he'd killed.
What did he say?
He laid it all out. Claimed over 200 in Ecuador, some tens in Peru, and many more in Colombia. He confidently put his total claim count at over 300 victims.
Just boasted about it.
Couldn't help himself. And that confession was the breakthrough they needed.
And the terrifying part is, he could back it up, couldn't he? He wasn't just making it all up.
No, he wasn't. To prove how smart and successful he was, to prove his claims to Cordova were real, he actually directed the authorities to specific burial sites.
He showed them where the bodies were buried?
Yes. The verification process must have been absolutely gruesome. But in just one single location, he pointed out, they recovered the remains of 53 bodies. 53 victims in one spot. That discovery alone confirmed the horrifying scale of what he'd done. And his confessions quickly led to the official confirmation of 110 victims just in Ecuador.
So he's caught, he's confessed, they have bodies. He goes to trial in Ecuador, convicted of murder. But then comes the sentence, and this is one of the most infuriating parts of the whole story.
It's the ultimate legal anticlimax, isn't it? He was convicted around 1983.
Yeah.
And the sentence he received was 16 years. 1-6.
16 years. For a minimum of 110 confirmed child murders? How is that even possible?
It sounds insane, but that was the maximum sentence available under Ecuadorian law at that time for murder. The legal system simply wasn't designed to handle a crime of this magnitude. It was built for, single homicides, not for one man killing potentially hundreds across years.
So the law itself was inadequate. It essentially guaranteed he'd get out relatively young.
Which raises that huge question. How does society justify releasing a man confirmed to have murdered over 100 children who boasted of killing 3 times that many after serving?
Well,
It turned out to be only 14 years.
he got out early.
Yeah. He served his time at Garcia Moreno Prison near Quito, and he was released 2 years early on August 31st, 1994. The official reason given, good behavior.
Good behavior for a man like that. The irony is just painful.
Breathtaking, isn't it? And his ego was completely undiminished. Just before he was released, he gave an interview, described himself with zero humility as The man of the century.
The man of the century. Unbelievable. Okay, so he's released in 94. What happens immediately?
He was immediately deported back to Colombia, handed over to the Colombian authorities.
And surely they knew who they were dealing with. They must have tried to lock him up for good.
They detained him right away, yes.
Yeah.
But they hit roadblocks. Colombian prosecutors apparently struggled to build a solid murder case against him that would stick in their courts. The evidence was gathered in Ecuador. Crossing jurisdictions is legally complex. Using confessions made elsewhere is tricky.
So they couldn't prosecute him for the murders.
They couldn't make it stick effectively. So instead of just letting this known monster walk free, the Colombian system did what institutions sometimes do. They found another way to contain him.
How?
They had him declared legally insane, mentally unsound, and committed him to a psychiatric hospital. It wasn't really about treatment. It was a way to keep him off the streets when prosecution failed. A holding pattern.
Okay, so he's contained, at least, in a mental hospital. But that wasn't the end of it, was it? Those institutional loopholes just kept appearing.
It's maybe the most bizarre twist in the entire administrative handling of this case. He spends 4 years in the mental hospital. Then, in 1998, Colombian mental health authorities declare him sane.
They declared him sane after everything.
Declared sane. And here's the truly unbelievable part. Based on that declaration, he was released from the mental institution. On bail.
Bail.
Yeah.
Pedro López. How much?
A nominal amount. Reports vary slightly, but it was equivalent to about $70 US. Some sources say it was more like a symbolic fine of $50.
$50. $70. To release the monster of the Andes.
Yes. With the condition that he had to check in with authorities periodically. But essentially, $50, and he walks out declared sane.
And what did López do the moment he got out on that symbolic bail?
Predictably, he vanished. Almost immediately after his release in 1998, he absconded.
Yeah.
Just dropped off the map.
Became a ghost. Any trace of him after that?
There's one last confirmed sighting. September 1999. He apparently went to the National Civil Registry office in Colombia to renew his citizenship card, got his official ID updated.
And after that, nothing.
After that, he effectively became a phantom. Gone.
But the police, they didn't just forget about him, did they? They must have suspected he was still a threat.
Oh, absolutely. The threat level was clear.
Yeah.
In 2002, both the Colombian National Police and Interpol issued international arrest warrants for him.
Why then? New crimes.
Yes. For a new murder case that had occurred, which apparently bore disturbing similarities to Lopez's original methods, his MO. This strongly suggests that authorities believe he hadn't stopped killing. He was potentially active again.
So Interpol was hunting him, but that warrant, it's not active anymore, is it?
Correct. That specific Interpol warrant was deactivated in 2005. Doesn't mean he's cleared, but the high-priority international alert was dropped. Maybe lack of leads, jurisdictional issues again. Who knows? He remains officially a fugitive.
Still out there, somewhere.
Potentially. And he was even named as a possible suspect, much later, in a 2012 homicide in Tunja, Colombia. So he stays on the radar in cold cases, a lingering shadow.
Even the record books struggled with him. Guinness World Records.
Yet for a while, bizarrely, up until about 2005, the Guinness Book of World Records listed Lopez as the most prolific serial killer. A truly grim title.
That seems inappropriate.
It caused controversy. People complained rightfully that it seemed to glorify mass murder, turning it into some kind of gruesome record to be broken. So the listing was eventually removed.
Okay, stepping back from the timeline, what does this whole saga tell us? The fact that someone like Lopez could operate for so long across 3 countries, kill so many, and then just disappear, it points to some deep systemic problems.
Absolutely. It's a case study in failure. The most obvious deficiency was the lack of coordination between law enforcement agencies. Colombia, Peru, Ecuador. They just weren't talking to each other effectively. Lopez knew this. He crossed a border, and it was like hitting a reset button on any investigation.
He used the borders as escape routes.
Precisely. But maybe even darker is the second point, the systemic victim marginalization.
The fact that he targeted specific groups.
Yes. Poor children, indigenous children, street kids. Their social status was incredibly low. They were already disconnected from protective institutions.
Yeah.
So when they disappeared...
It wasn't treated with urgency.
Sadly, no. Not with the resources or priority it deserved. Authorities defaulted to easier explanations: runaways, trafficking, because the victims themselves were invisible. The system implicitly valued some lives more than others, and Lopez exploited that horrific reality. And even if they had coordinated better, The legal tools were lacking, as we saw with that sentence. Right. The jurisdictional limitations, the different laws, the bureaucracy, the language barriers, all created friction. It made a transnational investigation incredibly difficult. Lopez benefited directly from the inability of these states to act as one against a threat that didn't respect their borders.
Okay, let's shift from the system back to the man himself. What was going on inside his head? What's the psychological profile of someone capable of this?
Professionals who examined him diagnosed him as a classic sociopath with antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD. That's characterized by this pervasive disregard for others' rights, starting young.
Key traits.
The complete lack of empathy or remorse is central. Superficial charm, he could apparently be quite convincing when he wanted to be. Extreme manipulativeness, and that grandiosity we talked about, the man of the century. Plus, a real skill for rationalization, always blaming society or his victims, never taking responsibility.
But his crimes were so specifically violent, sexualized, the strangulation, wanting to watch them die. Is it just ASPD?
It seems to combine with sexual sadism disorder. The diagnosis suggests his deep-seated misogyny, likely rooted in that early maternal rejection and abuse, became tangled with his pedophilic urges and this overwhelming need for absolute control. The pleasure wasn't just in the killing, it was in the suffering, the power, the degradation. Killing in daylight, the claimed tea parties, that points strongly to sadism. Power and pleasure derived directly from inflicting pain and terror.
Which leaves us now with the mystery, the tension, the big unanswered questions that still hang over this case. Did he really kill 300?
That number, it haunts the case. Most experts think the true count is likely in the hundreds, yes. Given how long he operated, the areas he covered, it's plausible. But we'll probably never know for sure.
Why not?
Too many missing reports from back then. Evidence degraded over decades. Burial sites in Peru and Colombia he claimed, but were never found. Verification is impossible now. Did he exaggerate for notoriety? Maybe. Or is the real number still buried out there? Either way, the confirmed 1 in 10 is already incomprehensible.
And the biggest question of all, is Pedro Lopez still alive today? He'd be, what, 76 years old now?
76. And the possibilities are all disturbing. Maybe he met his own violent end years ago, killed by vigilantes. Maybe relatives of victims finally getting the justice this system denied. That's one possibility. The more chilling thought, he successfully vanished, living quietly under a new name somewhere, maybe even in plain sight, benefiting from age and the world forgetting. Or, darkest of all, perhaps still offending sporadically in places with weak oversight, where an old man wouldn't draw suspicion.
The lack of closure is just devastating. For the families, for society, knowing one of history's worst killers just walked away.
It's the final tragedy here. His case is this awful blueprint for how serial killers can thrive. They flourish where you have massive social inequality, weak policing, weak cross-border cooperation, and large groups of vulnerable people who are just disconnected from any real protection.
It really hits home. The chilling fact remains. One of the world's most prolific, brutal serial killers was ultimately declared sane, handed basically pocket change for bail, and allowed to just evaporate into the world. No alarms, no major manhunt that succeeded.
That decision in 1998. That final failure. You have to wonder what the cost of that has been. What have we missed since? Is he still out there? It's a deeply unsettling thought to end on.
Okay, so we hope you liked our today's discussion. For more such discussions, subscribe to our channel, Phantom Homicide.